Today we're looking at 10 superstar players that must be traded soon. And this video is going to get a lot of people upset and saying, why would you trade this person or that person? But let's keep in mind, the last time I made a video similar to this was a few years ago. And in it, I said Carmelo Anthony needed to be traded from the OKC Thunder and Kyle Lowry or DeMar DeRozan needed to be traded from the Toronto Raptors. At the time, Melo had just gotten there and the Raptors had the best record in the Eastern Conference. And that became my most disliked video ever. So much so that I just had to end up taking it down. But just less than 1 year later, Carmelo gets traded, everyone agrees that he wasn't a great teammate, and DeMar gets traded and they win a championship. Hey, all I'm saying is if any of these sound crazy now, just give it some time. And okay, I know it probably doesn't help that I'm starting number 1 off with James Harden, but like I said, give it some time and let me explain. For the past 8 years since joining the Rockets, for the most part, James has been the best scorer in the league. And the Rockets have paired him with Dwight Howard, Carmelo Anthony, Chris Paul, and Russell Westbrook. The Chris Paul pairing turned out to have worked the best, and it makes sense. Every single postseason, James Harden and the whole Rockets team just goes on these stretches of the most inconsistent basketball we've ever seen. So CP3, one of the most consistent players ever, was the perfect balance to try and prevent that, as well as his leadership, defense, and willingness to take a step back. Well, when they traded him for Russell Westbrook, it really seemed like they were just going all in, one big final risk to try and win James a championship. And now they've tried everything, playing him with a good big man with superstars, playing big, playing small, and nothing has worked, so the only thing left to do really is try to trade James Harden. And they can either go for a rebuild or try to win with Westbrook. So there's a few options. I mean, you go for a rebuild and trade James to the Nuggets, for Michael Porter Jr., Bol, either Gary Harris or Will Barton to fill salary space, and Denver now has the best big three in the NBA, and the Rockets have a few future stars in their hand. Then I also want to say a trade to Philly could work too. But it's tough because Philly would probably want to trade James Harden for Ben Simmons to make a Harden and Embiid duo, since a Harden and Simmons duo probably wouldn't be great. While on the other hand, the Rockets would probably want the opposite. They'd want Joel Embiid for Harden to have a Westbrook and Embiid duo, since also a Simmons and Westbrook duo wouldn't be that good either. So it's tough, but I'm sure there's something there. Number 2, Nikola Vucevic. Okay, let's calm things down for a minute. So we're switching to a star that's a little less controversial. And I mean, this one doesn't really need explanation. There's no reason the Magic are still holding on to him. They need to trade Nikola for younger players not currently in their primes and get out of the playoffs. They could get a lot for him too. He's not as flashy, but he just put up 28 and 11 on 40% from 3 while taking 9 attempts a game against the Bucks. That's crazy, and a team could really use him. But right now, we're not going to be like the Orlando Magic and look for some trades and then just take the worst one possible like they always do. We're actually going to come up with a couple of good trades for him. Like, maybe trade him to the Nets for a deal centered around Jared Allen and Spencer Dinwiddie. Or even for a guy like Karis LeVert who needs to find a new team. But that one's not the best. Or maybe even a deal to the Warriors for Andrew Wiggins. The Magic would have to add more to it on their side. But hey, even though Vucevic only averaged 20 and 10 this season, that doesn't mean he wouldn't be more than worth it for the Warriors. I mean, a center in his prime that can shoot threes better than almost any big man in the league sounds like a perfect fit in Golden State. Then of course Wiggins is young enough to fit right in with the Magic. For number 3 and 4, we have to go over to the Spurs for DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge. And okay, the Spurs maybe shouldn't trade either of these guys because both of their $27 million contracts expire at the end of next season. Then they'll have $54 million of free salary space to use. But if they can find some really good deals, they should take them. Because a lot of teams with overpaid players would line right up and trade their young players or their picks to clear up some of their salary space. But the thing is, I don't know that the Spurs would take on bad contracts to get assets in return. They've never seemed like the kind of team to do that. So I really don't know where either of these guys could or should end up. If you have any ideas though, definitely comment them down below and let me know, because I got nothing. Number 5. Okay, I was gonna put number 5 as Damian Lillard, and based on the Blazers' track record, I probably should. In the past like 8 years since he's been there, the only good teammates they've gotten for him was CJ McCollum, who they drafted, and Carmelo Anthony, who they got this past year. And besides that, Dame's just pretty much carried the Blazers. But even still, think about the fact that, including this year, the Blazers have been swept for the past 4 straight seasons. And a trade with Dame is 99.9% not going to happen. For one, because he already said he wants to play his whole career there. And the second reason is why I didn't really want to officially put him on this list in the first place. Because Hassan Whiteside's $27 million contract just expired, which means they now have the ability this offseason to bring in another near-max player. And that could really be the difference maker for them. If they don't though, and Garland somehow messed this up. Even if he doesn't want to be, there's no denying that Lillard needs to be traded. Number 6, Chris Paul. This year CP3's proved that he's still got it, and whatever team he ends up on, he's gonna make a huge difference there. And while the Thunder have him, even though this year was a huge learning experience for all of their young players, they don't need CP3. They have a monster amount of future draft picks, and this year they proved they were good, but aren't in any position to win a championship in the near future. And a team would still offer a pretty good amount for Chris, so they can take their time finding a good trade for him. And if they do decide to make the move, a lot of people are saying a trade to the Bucks should happen, but they really don't have any young assets to trade to a young team that would make sense for them. So I think they're out, but a trade to the 76ers could work. Trade him for Tobias Harris, who's still relatively young, Matisse Thybulle, and some draft picks. For Philly, they'd be able to transition Ben Simmons to another position, get the leader that team desperately needs, and for OKC, they'd take on a bad contract, but a player that could still help them out, a solid young player, and add on to all of their draft picks. Number 7, unless the 76ers do something crazy with their roster, they should consider trading Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid, and we've talked about them a bunch already, but for good reason. I do think their first priority should be trading away some of their other players, and try to make a big 3 here, but if they can't, they should look into trading either Ben or Joel, because with what was supposed to be a super team, things just haven't worked out as planned. For Ben, I mean, this one isn't the best, but maybe they look towards Golden State. The Warriors could trade Andrew Wiggins and the 2nd overall pick for Ben, and yeah, that's a little much, but it could be the best deal the Warriors will get with that pick. Plus the way that they could transition Ben over to power forward, let Draymond play center like he used to, and it would give them a star lineup now and help them build towards their future. While for Philly, they get a young Andrew Wiggins, and with the 2nd overall pick, maybe draft LaMelo Ball at point guard. I mean, sounds like a win-win to me. Then there were some other deals I saw for him, like to the Pelicans, the Thunder, and the Bulls, but they didn't make as much sense. For Joel Embiid though, if they wanted to trade him, I mean, you gotta look at the Warriors deal again. They could make that same trade for Joel, and if it's not the Warriors, it really is hard to find a trade for Embiid that works out for both teams. The Warriors one honestly works the best, and if it's not them, maybe a trade to the Hawks would be better. They could offer a deal centered around their 6th pick this year, along with say Clint Capella and maybe 1 or 2 players out of John Collins, DeAndre Hunter, or Cam Reddish. Then they'd be able to pair Trae Young with Joel Embiid, and Trae's exactly the type of point guard that Embiid needs to play with. Throw in Kevin Huerter, who's a good shooter, and some of their other young players, and this team's only a few pieces away from being a real threat in the playoffs. But even then, this deal isn't a great one for what Philly needs right now. So I don't know, maybe they don't trade Embiid. Number 8, Kevin Love. Kevin Love's like Nikola Vucevic. He needs to be traded for obvious reasons that I really don't need to get into. He's in his prime and can still be a huge help for a lot of playoff teams, like the Denver Nuggets. Paul Millsap's contract's expiring this year, so they could bring in Kevin to fill in his place, and I think he'd be a great fit. He'd space the floor, could run the floor with the team, and wouldn't get in Jokic's way. Denver might have to give up Michael Porter Jr. to get him though, because him and Bobo are their only young assets that Cleveland would really want, and that might be a little too much to give up for Kevin Love, so maybe Cleveland throws in either Darius Garland or Colin Sexton too, since they need to trade one of them anyways. So that could work. And I also saw some talk for trade to the Raptors, which would be okay, but they do already have Siakam, and I hope they re-sign Serge Ibaka, and if they do, I mean, try Pascal out at small forward, play Love at power forward, then Serge at center. It'd give them a pretty serious lineup, and they need to make at least some changes this offseason. So that's an option, and I saw some people saying the Phoenix Suns too, which I wouldn't be mad at. I don't have a particular trade scenario for them, but trading for Love would finally make them a real playoff team, and it would be a much needed step in the right direction for them and Devin Booker's willingness to stay. Number 9, Paul George. I mean, this is probably just heat of the moment because it just recently happened, but man, after seeing the performance or lack of performance that Way Off Peaches put into display this postseason, I'm seriously considering trading him. You got a team that was expected to win a championship this year, and Kawhi was doing his thing, averaging 28, 9, and 5, but then you got PG putting up 9 or 10 points in every other game of this postseason, and that would mean he's just gotta go. Either he's slowly becoming the next star that just falls off, or he just doesn't fit in with the Clippers. Either way, though, it's not a good sign for them, and maybe they should do something. I have no idea where they trade him though, because a player like Paul George can really fit in on any team. Well, apparently any team besides the Clippers. But I don't know, maybe a team like the Jazz? Make a big move and try to trade him for Rudy Gobert or something? The Jazz might need to switch things up too, so that'd be interesting. Again though, maybe I'm overreacting. It was only his first year there, but it was also Kawhi's first year there too, and he made the transition smoothly. Number 10, Bradley Beal. We're ending things out with an obvious one here. Beal's in his prime right now, and with John Wall's contract, the Wizards aren't in any position to win for years, even with Bradley on the team. They need to not waste his talent talents any more than they already have and just finally trade him. And the Nuggets have always been an option for that, but a newer deal that I found could end up working out even better, which is one to the Brooklyn Nets, where in exchange for Beal, the Nets would send over a deal revolving around Spencer Dinwiddie, Caris LeVert, and Jarrett Allen, which could give Brooklyn a 5 of Kyrie Irving, Bradley Beal, Joe Harris, Kevin Durant, and DeAndre Jordan. And it would give the Wizards a point guard entering his prime, a young center with a lot of potential, and then Caris LeVert who has star potential. And the Nets really need to trade Caris LeVert anyways, because he's not going to fit in once KD is back. And for the Wizards, once John Wall is back, Spencer Dinwiddie can still come off the bench like he's used to, while Jarrett Allen would be in the starting lineup. I feel like for this one, the Nets would be giving up a little too much, so maybe they get some picks in return, or maybe even the Nets throw in some picks and try and get Davis Bertans. Either way though, if this deal went through, it'd solve a lot of problems for both teams. So surprisingly, there turned out to be a lot of star players that teams really need to trade. There wasn't a ton of different destinations for all of them, but comment any of them I might have missed, or any blockbuster trades that you'd like to see happen. Drop a like if you enjoyed, subscribe, and I'll catch you next video.